Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and today we're going to take a look at a new version of an old classic. This here is the Kolink Stronghold Overseer. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so for those of you that have watched the channel for a long time will know that the original version of this, the Kolink Stronghold, was amongst one of the favourite cases, and actually was one of my favourites for a very long time. There were various revisions of it, the Observatory, and now we have the Overseer. So let's take a look at the case, see what's been improved, see what is similar, and hopefully this one is going to be a winner, much like the Stronghold was. So what is this? This is a midi-tower case, and this is suitable for ATX form factors, micro ATX or ITX if you wanted to. Lots of room in here for fans, cooling, water cooling, air cooling, whatever you want to do. I think they've really thought about this and actually improved on the previous design and taken it up a level, but fortunately they haven't taken the price up a level. This one at the moment you can get in the UK for around about £45, which I think is actually fantastic value for money. Now, it may not be everyone's cup of tea. A lot of people these days do like to see a mesh front, but for me personally, as long as there's decent airflow, I'm not particularly bothered what's on the front. It's what's inside and the airflow and all the quality construction which really seals the deal. So to begin with, the front panel. Now the front panel got in this nice kind of brushed aluminium look. Now it isn't actually aluminium, it is actually plastic. The case itself is steel, the front panel is plastic. So they've saved a little bit of money there, but actually I still think it looks really good. The front panel I/O is all up here on the front rather than being on the top, which again, some people may like, some people may hate, but again, you take your choices. So at the top, we've got our power button. Underneath that, we've got a reset button. Then we've got headphone and microphone jacks. Then we've got a USB Type 2, and then we've got USB Type 3. 2 ports in there, so 3 ports in total, which is really nice to see rather than having 2 USB 2.0 and 1 USB 3. That, in my opinion, is a step forward. Now the front panel itself is relatively easy to take off, and also there's plenty of ventilation. We've got ventilation slits down both sides, and also this area here is all fully ventilated. Unfortunately, there's no filtration behind it, but because of the design of it, I don't think it's going to pick up a great deal of dust. And these days, I think most people are more concerned with airflow than they are filtration. It's relatively easy to open up your PC every now and then and give it a good hoover out, whereas to actually make sure a case has got decent airflow is not always quite so easy without taking a Dremel to it. So that's the front panel out of the way. Let's take a look at the side panel. So we've got this really nice tempered glass panel, which is pretty much the full size of the side, and it's also got quite a dark smoke tint to it. I'll just remove the panel so you can actually see what it's like. The panel itself is held on with 4 rather large thumb screws, which is nice and easy to use, and the actual glass is held on by rubber grommets, which sometimes do have a tendency to fall off, so do be careful, make sure you don't lose them when you're taking the panels off. They all stayed on that time. As you can see, so pretty dark smoke tint on there. So if there's any kind of inconspicuous wiring or ketchup and mustard going on inside the case, then it isn't going to be a problem. But if you do decide to put some RGB in here, it is going to be seen quite easily and will blend in rather nicely, and you won't get those piercing bright LEDs. On the inside, we've got a relatively straightforward design. So we've got our PCI Express brackets at the back. There is also an option with this to mount a GPU horizontally or vertically, depending on your choice. And there's room inside for a 2.5 bay GPU, although that will bring it slightly closer to the glass side panel. So obviously cooling measures and all that kind of stuff, take that into consideration. But for traditional mounting, absolutely no problems at all. Normal ATX layout inside, like I said, so ATX, micro ATX, ITX, and all the pillars and pins are in there, ready to go. Lots and lots of cable management options. So at the bottom, there's 3 punch outs, and at the top, you've got a couple there, and also got this really nice channel down the side for putting through your main ATX power, all those kinds of things, and also those real chunky USB Type 3 connections. So inside, no qualms whatsoever. You've got this really nice sturdy basement area, and you've got a cutout there. The cutout, for me personally, I'm not bothered either way. If you're building a slightly more budget system, maybe you'd like to see that blanked off to hide up your power supply if it's not a well-known branded one. But realistically, once power supply's in there, it's going to look nice regardless, even if it is a slightly cheaper model. At the back of the case, we've got a 120mm fan pre-installed, and that is actually a PWM fan, which is really, really nice to see. An actual 4-pin PWM fan. And the fan itself actually spins anywhere from 600 RPM up to a top speed of 1400 RPM. Also, on the cable, there is a pass-through cable, so you can actually attach another PWM connection to it, and you can power 2 fans off of one header. That is the same for both the fan in the rear and also the one that is mounted in the front as well. Unfortunately, the fans aren't RGB or anything like that, they're just plain old fans, but again, this is a relatively inexpensive case, so you don't really expect it to be plastered in RGB. Obviously, if you wanted to, you can remove the fans or put them in a different place and add RGB if you want to. Talking of fans in the rear, we've got this 120mm fan. Now in the documentation it does say it's only a 120mm that you can put in there, but there is actually an area so you could put 140mm fans in there. I'm not too sure why they've said that. We'll have a closer look at that when we spin it round. Same goes for the top section. So this top section, you've got a removable mesh filter, which is nice to see, and there's a nice honeycomb mesh on there. Also, again on the top, they do say that you can mount in there either 2 120mm fans or 2 140mm fans, which yes, I totally agree with. It also says you can add a 280 radiator or a 240 radiator. Now for me personally, I would say a 280 radiator might be pushing it, depending on your motherboard, VRMs, that kind of thing. It is rated to be able to take it, but do check with your motherboard. I would say if you are putting a radiator in there, a 241 would be a much wiser decision. Moving on to the front, now this is where it gets interesting, because in this front section, yes, we've got this included 120mm fan, but we've actually got space for up to a 360mm radiator, and there is a cutout at the front. We're giving you plenty of depth, so fans and a radiator in there, no problems at all, going to be absolutely great. I would suggest if you are going to mount any fans or any radiators in here, you want to mount them behind the metal panel, which is on the front, because if you mount them in front of the metal panel, they are going to come awfully close to this front section and will choke off the fans a little bit. So move them back a little bit, going to be absolutely fine. So inside wise, yep, no problems at all. It's all finished in a really nice satin matte black finish, and everything is pretty much where you expect it to be. Loads of punch outs, plenty of room, gets my thumbs up. So let's take a look at the front panel. Now the front panel is where some of you may dislike this a little bit. Now the front panel, like I said, is plastic. There is ventilation down both sides, and we've got this section on the front, so airflow isn't going to be a concern. There is also underneath where there's a grab handle, that is all completely open as well, so airflow is definitely not going to be an issue with this. Again, the front panel having this kind of gunmetal or brushed aluminium type effect, again, may not be to everyone's taste, but I think really, again, for £45, I think it looks pretty darn good. So let's take off this front panel, which is taken off by just pulling hard on the front. And unfortunately, because all the I/O is on the front, the cables are captive, so do be careful when you're doing your cable management. Leave a little bit of slack in case you need to take this off for cleaning the fans, that kind of thing. The cables themselves pass through pretty easily, so for any maintenance tasks or even just when you're building it, you can get this out of the way so it's not bothering you. So now we can see a little bit more clearly what is going on here up front. So again, as you can see, you've got the 120mm fan in there, again PWM with the pass-through, so excellent choice, we do like that a lot. And in fact, if you take the 2 fans out of the equation, I would say the fans are probably the value of about £6 to £8 each, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but around that sort of thing. So if you factor in maybe £10 for the pair of fans, this makes this case about a £35 case, which I think is absolutely brilliant. The mounting area here for the fans, I can see you've got the 120s in here, so you can go for 3 120s, 2 140s, but also something which I kind of noticed in the packaging inside there's actually some extra really long screws, and these seem to fit into these pinholes here, which means potentially you could, on this front section, if you wanted to, have 2 200mm fans, which is pretty insane, or combinations obviously, one 200mm and a 120 or something like that. Now again, I wouldn't recommend it because they would essentially need to be mounted on this front section, and that is going to take you very, very close to the front panel of the case, so maybe that'll choke it off a bit. Maybe it's because this design is used on a couple of other versions of Kolink cases, or maybe we will be seeing another version of this in the foreseeable future, potentially with a mesh front, which would be absolutely amazing. The fans themselves, if you wanted to put 200mm fans in, I've had a look behind this section, you couldn't fit them in because of this cable management channel, so they would need to be mounted on the front. Again, it's not in the instruction manual or in any of the documentation. This is purely my interpretation of what the screws are for. They could be for something else entirely, so if you've got any idea what they're for, please do let us know in the comment section. I'd love to know. So I think that pretty much sums up the front section. Again, excellent for cooling. 360mm worth of cooling in there, easily done. Yeah, it's going to be great. So let's go around to the side panel. The side panel is a relatively solid panel. It's held on with 2 thumb screws, so that's nice to see. And that takes us round to the back. So in this back section, again, no real issues here. I can't see any problems at all. We've got, again, plenty of punch outs for your fan connections at the top, for your main ATX supplementary power supply here. Excellent stuff. Also, there's punch outs in this area for cable ties and cable management. It does look as if this is actually quite close to the case, the side panel, but the side panel actually has a gap as well inside of it, so you do get a reasonably good area in the back here for cable management. Would have been nice to see a little bit more room in here, but it's totally functional and will do the job. And again, there's plenty of tie down points, punch outs, etc. You can mount a 2.5-inch drive on this section here. Also, you can mount one on the front of this section here and here. So 1, 2, 3, and a fourth 2.5-inch drive on this bracket at the bottom. So we've got a removable bracket there for 3.5-inch drives. So two 3.5-inch drives can be mounted on there, one inside the cage, one on top of the cage, or a 3.5 in the bottom and a 2.5 on top, or just a 2.5 on the top and use the rest of the room underneath there for cable management. Alternatively, if you're using NVMe or M.2 style drives, you can take this cage out altogether, giving you a huge amount of room for a power supply. Power supply wise, up to 190 mils, so that covers pretty much most bases, I think. Also on the cooling side of things, actually, for the CPU cooler, didn't mention that when we were on the other side, but you can have a CPU cooler on here of up to 175 mils. So that is a monster. Most of your 120 mil tower coolers come up to around 155 to 165 mil. So you've got another centimeter in there as well. So if you want a really, really big cooler, you can do very, very easily. This drive cage here is actually removable. So there's just a thumb screw on there and that slides off. So if you don't want to have a drive in there and you want a little bit more clear in this back area, again, you can remove that, leave it out altogether. The choice is yours on that one. But I think actually for drive storage, we are starting to move away now from 3.5-inch drives, so 2.5-inch drives seem to be the way we're going, especially with SSD prices coming down as much as they are. So you could quite happily have like a 1 terabyte SSD in there, have your NVMe boot drive, you're ready to go. This channel here, nice and easy for cable management. Again, more punch outs here. So if you do decide to mount those 2.5-inch drives on the back side of this panel, then you can have your cables coming down through here to make everything look nice and neat. Also in the basement area, we've got our bits and bobs. So we've got the screws, a couple of cable ties, all that kind of stuff. Again, on a relatively cheap case, it's nice to see a couple of cable ties included to help you with those cable management tasks. So as you can see, we've got a massive punch out here. So if you are mounting larger coolers in here, you're going to have nice and easy access to the back of the motherboard. Personally, I would have liked to have seen this pushed in slightly more, maybe 5 mil, maybe reducing the CPU cooler height to 170 mil, but just to give you a few more millimeters in the back for cable management. Again, you possibly don't need it, but it would have been nice to just have a little bit more wiggle room. But I think that pretty much wraps up the back side of the case. Overall, again, I can't find any fault with it. Moving around to the back of the case, so again, we've got our mounting area here for 120mm fans. There is mounting areas there for 140s. Again, I'm not too sure why they don't have that in the documentation, but seems like it's seems like it's a relatively straightforward thing to do. I can't see any reason why they didn't add that. So anyway, a little bit odd. On the back here, we've got, unfortunately, some of these PCI Express blanking plates are of the captive type, so once you bend them, you will not be able to replace them. But having said that, there's 1, 2, 3, which actually are replaceable. So I think that's going to cover most bases. Most graphics cards are going to be either single, dual, or triple slot devices. So as long as you're not using any other PCI Express devices, this is going to be absolutely fine. Again, we've got the option here to mount the graphics card vertically, horizontally, whichever you choose. And there is actually a relatively big gap there. So even if you have got a slightly bigger cooler on there, you shouldn't find it interfering with the glass too much. Moving down to the very bottom, we've got our power supply area. Again, we said up to 190mm power supply. Again, if you do remove the drive bay in there, you can put a power supply in there, basically, as long as you want to. Now, graphics card, actually, we didn't mention that. Graphics card length, you can get up to 340mm graphics cards in here because there is actually a ton of room there. So, yeah, lots and lots of flexibility, lots and lots of options. So let's take a look at the bottom. On the bottom of the case, usual kind of deal, pretty much what you'd expect. So you've got 4 raised feet with quite large rubber pads, which is nice. Also, we've got the grill filter over the power supply area, which is one of those kind of cheapy ones, which not brilliant, not easy to remove, but totally functional, gets the job done. Also, you've got mounting areas here for the 2 screws. So if you take those 2 screws out, then you can remove the drive cage, which is inside. So again, if you don't want to have that in there to give you a bit more room underneath, then you can certainly remove that if need be. Moving on to the top, as we said earlier, this is the mounting area for the radiators or fans, so you've got slightly offset area here, so you've got quite a big area there to bring it away from the motherboard, and hopefully from some of the B-roll that you've seen you can see what the actual clearance is like. Again, if you've got large VRM heat sinks, you may find possible potential issues for clearance, so do bear that in mind. If you're not too sure, please do let us know in the comment section or drop me an email, mike@mikesunboxing.com, and I'll try and do some measurements for you to see what is possible. We will be doing a build in this case as a follow-up video, as we generally tend to do, and we will try and put some radiators in here to see what actually fits and what the clearance issues or tolerances are actually like. But you've got a really nice mesh here, the honeycomb mesh, which I really do appreciate. Mounting areas, 120s along this strip, or 140s along this strip. So again, radiators, fans, combinations thereof. Lovely jubbly. So that pretty much wraps up things. I'm actually really pleased with this. The original Stronghold was a great case and had lots of flexibility. It's nice to see that they've moved this top section out a little bit further. That was one of the downfalls of the original Stronghold, that it did seem to be a little bit too close for comfort on that back section. Also, the reworked back area with the cable management and the punch outs and cutouts, again, really do appreciate all that kind of stuff. The metal, I'm not too sure if it is thicker, but it certainly does seem a little bit more sturdy, so again, well done on that. And the addition of the two fans with the PWM control and also the pass-through, again, another fantastic addition. So if you are in the market for a case around about the £45 mark, and you're not particularly bothered about RGB, or you've got RGB components of your own that you can add in, I think this is definitely worth putting on your wish list. So there we go, this has been the Kolink Stronghold Overseer. I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.